Hey, welcome to another Enneagram podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Yet another Enneagram podcast. But this one's different. Another Enneagram podcast is here to help you be a better leader for your team.
We know leadership is already challenging enough, and it can be downright frustrating when your team communication breaks down.
Another Enneagram podcast is here to tell you stories of leaders just like you who are learning how to lead their teams better with the Enneagram. If you want your team to communicate better, be more productive, and love their jobs, another Enneagram podcast is for you. Hey, welcome to another Enneagram podcast. I'm your host, Ryan, and got my friend and co-host here with me, Cody. Cody, what is happening today?
Not much, man. Just enjoying some sweet weather in Southern California, and just kind of in a season of waiting, man.
Yeah, trying to figure out what's next, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
So for those that don't know, that if this is your first time listening to this episode or watching on Instagram, I am an Enneagram 1 and Cody is a 7. Mm-hmm. And another Enneagram podcast is, well, another Enneagram podcast, but not just like any other podcast. Hopefully this one is here to help you lead your team better using the Enneagram. So that's the whole idea here, is talking about Enneagram in the context of teams and leadership and how it can be beneficial to you. So today, Cody and I wanted to talk about, Cody, it was your thing. Why don't you introduce it?
Yeah. So, man, just in the last 5 years, I've been able to spend a lot of time with some healthy leaders, and have really tried to invest in myself, whether through reading books or listening to podcasts or different things like that. And it seems like one of the things that people smarter than me spend a lot of time talking about is, as leaders, we can get in these really bad habits of comparing ourselves to other leaders. We read books, we listen to podcasts, we do things like that. And it's hard to kind of walk away from those things, not wanting to completely just try to be like that person, trying to be like that author of that book or that podcast. And I believe that we have these very specific superpowers, if you call them. And so, I think one of the things that we can do using the Enneagram is help not only ourselves, but help other leaders find what their superpower is with their personality type, and then also try to utilize the powers that their teammates have. And so, I think the biggest thing is just, you have been gifted very uniquely. And so be the leader that you can be, and then get to a place where you can release things that maybe aren't your strongest point to the people around you, and utilize your team.
Yeah. So talking about leadership, what would you say are some of the marks of, I would say immature, but I want to go a little bit deeper and say insecure. What are some of the marks of an insecure leader?
Okay. Yeah.
You would say? Gotcha.
Yeah. I think, well, just in my own life, when I've seen myself really struggling with immaturity as a leader, is two big things. It would be one, I'm way too controlling. I have a really hard time letting go of things. I have a really hard time releasing and delegating things to other people, because I have this fear that if I release it, then it's not going to get done the way that I envisioned it, or I'll get a little transparent here. It might get done better. And then I'm not as important anymore. And so, I think that insecurity comes from a fear of being replaced, a fear of kind of being overshadowed. I think that's the word. And then, also just my own unrealistic expectations that I have on myself. I think that those would be the big things for me.
Yeah, that's good. I know, like, a lot of times the biggest complaints I hear about leaders from their team members, a lot of times is about just like bosses or leaders that are overbearing, that are micromanaging, right? Who just try to be involved in every little bit of minutia and detail, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a time for leaders to take things by the reins and to be involved in the nitty-gritty details of it. But most of the time, if that is your like main mode of operating, right, you're going to drive your team crazy and eventually drive them away, right?
Absolutely.
And so being able to not only know your own superpower, right, but also the superpower of those on your team, kind of gives everybody a lane to run in a little bit.
Of course.
And so I can hear the FedEx guy backing down my street. If you heard a bunch of beeping, that's what that was. But yeah, it kind of gives everybody a lane to run in, so they're not bumping into each other, right? That's why when you have races and people running races, they have lanes, when you look at like a track, because if you don't have those rules set up, then people are bumping into each other and it's just chaos. And so that's why those different lanes for everybody to run in are so important. And the same thing's true in a team environment, that you have to have specific lanes for people to run in. And when you try to run in someone else's lane, you're going to bump into them, and that's going to cause friction. It's going to cause people to trip up, and somebody, if not everybody involved in it, is going to bear some consequences from someone not running in their lane. Yeah, and so that's what we want to talk about today is being you, leaning into your strengths, running into your lane. And so why do you think the Enneagram is good for that conversation? And then after that, we'll kind of jump into each Enneagram number and what that means for them.
For sure. Yeah, I think the Enneagram is an amazing tool to use for this specific problem, because it's going to help you understand not just like how you do things, but why you do them and what's the motivation there. And so I think it's going to help you understand how you approach your job, how you approach day-to-day tasks, the things that you're going to struggle with, the things that are going to come easy to you. And then as you look at your team and as you look at, hey, what are the common frictions that we have? What's some pretty consistent tension? Because like you said, I would imagine it can easily come from, you got people trying to be people they're not. You got people trying to do things that are just not just like not natural for them, but things that are going to be very challenging for them to do and to consistently do well. And so the Enneagram for me was an amazing tool to understand, hey, what I bring to the table in regards to my job, and then even some areas that I can help my teammates. Some things within their lanes that are challenging for them, or just like honestly like life sucking task. Hey, how can I step in and help you? And to take away the threat, to take away the tension, to where we can actually be great coworkers and not competitors, I think is powerful.
Yeah, hey, that's good. I like that. So let's jump in, talk about each of the 9 Enneagram types, what their superpowers are, and maybe, even beyond just a superpower, if there's anything that we want to add that's maybe just a stereotypical strength, I suppose, of numbers, we can add that in there. And hopefully through that, we'll give people ideas about what lanes they can be running in, and helping the people on their team find the right lanes to run in as well.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. Should we start with 1?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I'm an Enneagram 1, like we've talked about. And the superpower for type 1s is just the idea of improvement, right? It's the make it better mentality. I'll tell you, for me, whenever I walk into a situation, whenever I walk into a room, that's typically what starts happening in my mind is, okay, I see how everything is here. How can I make it better? Oh, this would be better if this was here. This would be better if it was here. Like I think I've joked before, maybe on this podcast, buffet lines are just like, I just start like wanting to slap my own head, because I'm like, man, why would they put the plates there and the silverware there, and the salad should not go there? Why would they put the soup at don't put your drinks at the beginning of a buffet line, because then you got to hold your drink while you're trying to put stuff on your plate. It's silly, right? Buffet lines should always be run by Enneagram 1s. Not that buffet lines are ever going to exist again after coronavirus, but that's the idea. Enneagram 1s, the superpower is to make it better. We can take something, we can see something, and see how it can be improved.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, yeah, thoughts on that?
No, I love it. I mean, I think Enneagram 1s have this amazing ability to step into chaotic situations and provide order, to provide a plan. And I'm thankful for 1s, because as a head type person, especially as a 7 who can just get lost in future ideas, to have somebody at the helm that can look at me and be like, hey, let's sort through this and let's sort through that. But hey, let's lock in on that one thing, because that's good. And we can take that somewhere. I'm thankful for 1s.
Yeah. Heck yeah. So 2s, the superpower for Enneagram twos is what I call sensing and serving, right? So twos, better than any other number, in my opinion, can sense like the emotional needs of
Mm,
other people and then serve them to meet those needs. It's just like, it's almost like a sixth sense, right? Where they just have this extra antenna, right? That's popping up and saying, okay, oh, this person's hurting, this person needs something. And so you see twos like swooping into action, like, hey, how can I help? What do you need?
for sure.
And play that role really well. So yeah, what do you think about twos and the superpower of twos and the roles that they can play on teams?
Oh my gosh. I've never been a part of a team where I had a two kind of in the captain's chair, but I've had the privilege of working with a lot of nonprofits that are just swarming with Enneagram twos.
Hmm.
And you will not find more servant minded people. Like you will not find, like that is the heartbeat of any organization is going to be those twos because they're going to be right there in the trenches with people. And we actually have a chef here at our camp who's a two. And this dude will go out of his way. Kids that have allergies or, different types of, things that they can't eat, different things. My goodness, this guy will go above and beyond to provide exactly what they need. And so you want to talk about a team player, somebody that you can't live without. Twos are those people.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you've seen our Instagram live over here, but the twos are excited. They're getting some press, and so we got Jessica something on there who's whooping for the twos, and then
Yeah.
our buddy Paul Ayub is cheering for the twos as well. So they're coming in strong on social media right now.
That's awesome.
Hey, we love some twos. Ready to talk about threes?
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah. All right. So the superpower for Enneagram threes is what I call utility, right? Threes are the ultimate utility player. If you need a role to be filled, if you need, a position to be filled, a hat to be worn, like threes are your go-to people because they're just the chameleons of the Enneagram. They can fit into whatever is needed or expected of them better than just about anybody. Now, I'm not saying that they need to do that forever, right?
Nope.
That's not where they need to be. But when it comes down to it and you have a gap, when you have a need, a role that's not being fulfilled and need somebody to step in there and do the job, man, I don't know if I could come up with anybody that would be better fit for that than for threes. So thoughts on threes?
Yeah, man. Yeah, just to tag onto that. I don't know people who are more driven than type threes. If a three sets his mind to something, like it's going to get done. And threes are just awesome to have on the team, man, because they're kind of like sevens in this way of like when you start talking about ideas, when you start talking about, a potential solution or, the next big idea. Threes are those people that like they want to put some meat to it. Like they want to like actually let's get rolling, like, and let's do it big and let's do it right. And so yeah, threes are always so fun to have around the office.
Yeah, I feel like I have worked with a lot of threes. I know a lot of threes, close friends with a lot of threes. And when I've worked with the ones that are leaders, like team leaders, business leaders, things like that, one of the things I feel like I notice is a lot of them, they are hard workers, right? And they want to make things happen. And so that can make it difficult for them to let go, to delegate, kind of like what you were saying at the beginning. But when they can manage to do that, I don't know if there's a number that's more relieved, right? To offload things off of their own plate and to let other people run in their own lanes, because even though threes like to think, or at least like to portray that they can do all of these things, I think deep down, most of them know that I'm not actually as good at this thing as what I would like for people to think that I am. And so then all of a sudden, if somebody comes along and a three gets brave enough to empower that person to do that thing that they're probably better at anyway, it's really scary. But once it's finally done, it's just like this huge weight off of the three's shoulders. And so
that's great.
I feel like I've seen that a lot of times.
For sure. All right, man. How about those fours?
Man, fours. So the superpower for four, there's two words there that I think are important. One is creativity, right? Which won't surprise you. And the second one, though, is connection. Okay. Right. And so here's what I mean by that. Creativity is kind of obvious. Fours are typically very creative, expressive people, thinking outside the box, thinking very artistically and nuanced. And And so that's not surprising. But one of the things that comes out of that is this connection. Fours, more than any other number, I think, value a real, true connection with
Okay.
other people and with the
Yeah.
world around them,
Mm.
right? It's one of the big tensions between threes and fours is that threes are able to kind of, put on different masks or whatever it is to fit the situation. And fours like hate masks typically, right?
Yeah, for
They're
sure.
like, no, I want what's real and raw and true.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by connection. Fours are able to connect emotionally in this way that other numbers usually can't. And so,
Okay.
especially if somebody's going through something difficult or even something just really, really good and exciting, fours can like connect with that emotion
Mm.
better than other numbers.
Yeah.
Like if you ever are upset about something, everybody's been in this situation where you've like had a bad day, had some
Mm.
bad news come, or just feeling, rough about something, and you try to express that, and somebody's like, "Oh, cool." And you're like, "Okay, you didn't connect with me at all on that."
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's when you need a four to sit there with you and not try to fix your problems, right? Not try to talk you out of it or make it feel better, but
Mm.
to actually sit with you and connect with that and be like, "Hey, I get that."
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by creativity and connection for fours. So,
I love that.
so yeah, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, that struck an idea. We recently went through Donald Miller's Story Brand conference that he put on, and he talks about this idea that, especially for businesses that sell a product, is that from the outside, it seems that people buy products that fix external problems, but they're
Mm-hmm.
actually shopping for things that fix internal problems and the way that
Right.
things make them feel. So if you're a business who has fours on your team, nobody is going to be able to help you become aware of, but honestly fix some of those internal issues that your product might be able to fix or provide solutions to. Yeah, fours, twos have that ability to sense needs, but fours have almost like this like spider sense, man, like you said, to emotions and when
Yeah.
people are feeling things. And then they have this really deep empathetic drive to, sit with people in those emotions, but actually kind of help. I think they can provide some guidance through that.
Yeah.
So for my four friends, man, like if I'm feeling something and like want to escape it, they're the people that I go to like, hey, help me make sense of this. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Well, and that's what you say there brings up a good point. It could be confusing between twos and fours because they're
Mm,
both very emotional,
yeah.
and usually very aware of emotions. Twos are typically more aware of the emotions of others, and fours are very aware of their own emotions,
Gotcha.
and their response to emotions is different too. So twos, when they sense emotional needs, they're going to want to help that, like,
Mm,
what can I do?
yeah.
Whereas fours typically, when they encounter emotions, they want to connect with that and sit in it and laugh if you're laughing, cry if you're crying, and be a
Yeah.
part of it rather than help it.
That's
And so
great.
that's a big difference between twos and fours.
Yeah. So good.
Fives,
Yeah, man.
yeah. I don't know if we got any fives listening in on social media, but if you're there, give a little shout.
Uh-huh.
So fives superpower is to know, right? So fives are just usually full of knowledge, right? I always say that if you want any number on your, pub trivia team, you want an Enneagram 5 because fives just tend to know things, right?
Yes.
And when you ask a five, like, how do you know that? Fives typically respond with something like, why do you not know that? Right. um,
Yes.
but that's the superpower of fives, is that they're just these like sponges for knowledge, right?
Hmm.
And so they can really thrive in an environment where they get to spend time absorbing knowledge, but also the return on that is that they can spend time sharing knowledge too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I have a mentor that is a five, and it was so cool because, for years and years and years, man, he just started collecting and almost hoarding all this information. And then over the last couple of years, he's gotten to this place where he almost daily is releasing these incredible, kind of like wisdom pieces on Facebook and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think fives in the office and on a team are so valuable because if there's something that you're dealing with that you don't understand, if there's something that you're dealing with, you've been assigned a task, and there's elements of that task that are confusing, man, bring in a five. And man, assign them with like going into the depths of whatever that might be. And I think fives, yeah, they have that superpower of being able to make sense of things, and provide clarity to things that I just do not get. Yeah, fives are, yeah, you may have to kind of pull them out of their shell a little bit, because they can be a little bit more reclusive sometimes and introverted. But man, I would imagine that for the fives listening, if your boss came in and said, "Hey, I got some homework for you. We're about to dive into this thing. Once you do some research, man, I would imagine they would come alive."
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's funny. One of my favorite stories about a five was I went to do an enneagram training for a team one time. And I may have told this on here before too. I can't remember. But about halfway through the training, we took a break and I had explained what the numbers were. And this guy came up to me that was a five. And he told me that when he heard that we were doing this enneagram training thing, he was kind of skeptical and wasn't sure about it. He took the assessment, said he was a five. He was like, I don't know. And so then he spent the next 3 hours before the training researching the Enneagram. And I was like, dude, that's amazing. That's one of the most five things I've ever heard.
Yeah,
no other number
awesome.
in this room spent 3 hours researching the Enneagram to prepare for this thing.
That's so funny. I thought you were about to say he like read like the whole like wisdom of the Enneagram book or something like that in 3 hours. So
That was probably the next day. But
yeah, he has a library, an Enneagram library by now. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
Dude, ready for sixes?
Oh yeah.
All right. So we're both quite familiar with sixes. If you didn't know, we're both. So somebody on here said, my husband's a five, smartest human being I know. That was on our Instagram live feed. That's good. So yeah, sixes. Cody and I are both married to sixes. Our wives are both sixes, and sixes, the superpower for sixes, probably the best word I can come up with for it is preparation. Right? Yes. That sixes want to be prepared, not for like your everyday, life stuff. Sixes want to be prepared for like, if a meteor strikes the planet, right? Or whatever the worst case scenario is. Your sixes are thinking about that and preparing for that. And so in the context of a team, having somebody who's thinking through, okay, what should our response be, or what do we need to be prepared for if this happened, if this happened, if this scenario happens. And so, yeah, that's the superpower of sixes is preparation.
Yes. So here's a little fun one for you. So last night, Alicia and I needed to hang like a barn door, like railing. And so, me, it's like 9 o'clock. I'm thinking, hey, this thing's fun. Let's just do it, And so Alicia and I are about to dive into this project, and I can just see it on her face. Like she is like calculating all the things. She's like, okay, well, what if this part doesn't, what if this breaks, or, and sure enough, like 3 or 4 of the things that she thought actually happened. And so I was like, you know what, we'll just do it tomorrow. Let's not worry about it tonight, But man, like in an office setting or in like a team setting, man, sixes are just absolutely incredible with that kind of forecasting gift that they have. And so if you're a leader who has a six on your team, man, you got to create that open communication with them. Yeah, and I will say it's going to be tough sometimes, because there are going to be moments where you are thinking of solutions and they have already thought of it. And so when they bring it up, don't be offended by that. That's just the way that they're wired. And so utilize that, capitalize on that. Sixes are absolutely incredible people.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just say too, on sixes, again, sixes kind of hallmark trait is that worst case scenario thinking. Mm-hmm. And what's important to remember about that is most of the time, the worst case scenario does not happen. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting balancing act. If you are leading a team that has sixes on it, is I completely agree with you. You got to make space for that open communication. But at the same time, you and the six on your team have to understand that most of the things that a six is anxious about aren't actually going to happen.
Totally.
So it's a system where you plan and prepare for something that you're both okay with the fact that you may never use, right? It's the idea of, the 1,000-year flood, right? Yeah. That there's an epic flood that only happens once every 1,000 years or something. And most people will go through their whole lifetime and never experience something like that. Sure. But when it does happen, right? And it, the 1,000-year flood idea always eventually happens.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can be prepared for that, maybe even just kind of like off to the side in a back room somewhere kind of a deal,
Yeah.
then you can survive some things that a lot of people won't. And I'm saying that at an interesting time in the world right now,
For
where
sure.
it's not a 1,000-year pandemic, but I would say it's probably fair to call this 100-year pandemic, right? Probably the closest thing to the coronavirus stuff would be like the 1918 flu epidemic.
Yeah.
And that's almost exactly 100 years apart.
Yeah.
And so there are plenty of people who, have lived their whole life and never experienced something like this before, you and I included.
Mm-hmm.
And, so you can't say these kinds of things never happen.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
true, they don't happen often, but you need to have people in place. And you can see different countries around the world who did have people in place and plans in place, and people in countries who did not.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge, example of what we're talking about on a small scale for a team and for a leader,
For
and
sure.
how sixes can play a really important role. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
All
Sevens?
right, man. Sevens.
Okay. Well, you get to tell me if I'm wrong on this. You're the
Okay.
expert on sevens. But when I talk about sevens, what I say is their superpower. Again, two words here. The words are joy and energy.
Okay.
Right? Joy and energy. I think that's the superpower that sevens bring to their teams. That they come in and bring a lot of joy and a lot of energy. Sevens. I know this is more stereotyping, but I always kind of joke that sevens go through most days with like a song in their head, right?
Yep.
And it's like this rhythm, and when they come into the office, they're bringing that song with them, and bringing that energy with them, and that's so helpful because, I mean, let's be real. If it was a team made up of people like me, the energy levels would not be great. I'm just saying that. So yeah, I really value sevens for that trait, among others, but specifically for that joy and that energy that they can bring to a team environment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think sevens are kind of similar to threes in the way that they can wear a lot of hats. Sevens, sorry, can be pretty flexible people. And so if you got sevens on the team, sevens value freedom, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's great to have all the time. I think one of the things that I've learned about myself is that I thrive when there's healthy structure, when there's healthy rhythms. And so if I can be in a work environment where those things are provided, but then I'm also being utilized for my flexibility and my energy level, then that's a healthy environment for me to be a part of, for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. Eights?
Eights, man.
All right. So eights are one of my favorite numbers when it comes to talking about superpowers. Again, two words on this. And the first one is strength, which again won't surprise anybody.
Yep.
Eights are typically very strong, personalities, but also strong like convictions and drive and things like that.
Sure.
But the second word is advocacy, right? Advocacy. Eights, what a lot of people don't understand about eights is that people might think that an eight doesn't care, right? Just because they're so strong-willed and stuff. But that is so far from the truth. Eights actually care so deeply and so passionately that they can sometimes accidentally run people over in an effort to do what they care about, to protect those that can't protect themselves. And so they have this advocacy drive in them that causes them to just fight, on behalf of the people that can't fight for themselves. And so eights are, a lot of times what I've seen is a lot of eights are attracted to like nonprofit type work, justice oriented type work, stand in the gap on behalf of others. And so, that's what I would say the eights superpower is to champion, strength and advocacy specifically on behalf of other people. Yeah, man. Eights are warriors, man. They, I think when expectations are communicated clearly, I think when there is a healthy and open environment for them to utilize that strength. I've actually read before that even more than sevens, eights actually have the most energy of any type, and so they've got to have a place where they can use that and fight for the underdog, in different capacities. And so, if you're leading eights, it's challenging. It is absolutely challenging because in a lot of circles, they're actually known as the challenger. Yeah. But I promise you that challenge, that push is because they believe, because they care.
and they're just waiting for opportunity to fight alongside you. So yeah, love
Yeah,
it.
awesome. All right, last one, nines. So nines, their superpower, the word there is perspective,
Mm,
right? Nines have this unique and incredible perspective that nobody else has. And I don't think it's an accident that, nines, when you look at a visual, diagram of the enneagram, the nine numbers around it, nines sit on the top of it.
hmm.
And it's like they have this higher vantage point,
Yeah,
and can see down on everybody else and can kind of put on, their lenses a little bit. In my experience, nines typically have the most trouble figuring out what their enneagram type is, because they have this just ability to hear your perspective and be
mhm.
like, oh yeah, I could see
Yeah,
that, and to
totally.
hear their perspective and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense too, and oh
Yeah.
yeah, that one makes sense to me too. And so nines can have trouble like identifying with a specific number, because they're like, I feel all of these things,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And so that can be confusing, but it can also be a really, really valuable thing to bring to a team, especially when it comes to things like conflict, mediation, and just helping people be on the same page together. So I tend to tell teams, if you ever have a conflict and you need help navigating it, get to a table with a healthy nine, because a
Yeah,
nine will help everybody see each other's sides of things. That's their superpower, is
for sure.
perspective.
Yep. Yep. And just something to think about with nines, I actually, a couple years ago had the privilege of leading a team where I had a few nines on my team, and got to this place where if I could take a few extra steps, nines don't really like tension. They don't necessarily like, just naturally thrive in tense environments. And so if you've got sevens and eights on a team with nines, man, there can be there can be a lot of tension there.
Yeah.
And, but I found myself in this place where if I kind of did some like pre-work going into meetings or pre-work going into the work week, where I asked questions and I communicated expectations and I gave very clear goals. You want to talk about like just some powerhouse people on your team, man, those nines, because like you said, they can see all these different perspectives. They can see all of
Yeah.
these different needs. And for me, especially in that kind of season of my leadership, they could see things that I was almost incapable of seeing at that time. And so, man, incredibly resourceful people.
Yeah. Man, so that's our list of nine, the different superpowers of each of the Enneagram types. I know for me, that is an incredibly insightful piece of information when
Yep.
I'm working with different teams and trying to help people work together, but also get the most out of themselves, right? And to live into who they want to be. One of the things you said earlier was about like leaders that are trying to be someone else, right?
Yeah.
Like they see a leader that they like and they really admire and look up to,
Hmm.
and they're like, oh, okay, I want to be like that person.
For sure.
And there's good things associated with that, but one of the things that's not good about that is that each one of us has this kind of superpower, this thing that we are just incredible at and should be doing. And if we're spending all of our time trying to emulate someone else's
Yep.
leadership, we may
Yep.
be missing out on our own superpower, which will help us contribute even more to our teams than just emulating someone else. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, I appreciate you bringing that idea up for us to talk about here, for us to discuss on our Instagram feed over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a good conversation. Anything else to add before we
Yeah.
wrap up?
Real quick last thought is I think that an incredibly powerful lesson to learn as a leader is that you've got to get to a place where you can shift the perspective of using people on your team to utilizing people on your team.
What do you mean?
So what I mean by that is like a lot of times I've had conversations with people who work in an organization or a business or a nonprofit, and they say, I feel like a pawn in somebody else's game, or I feel like a tool in somebody's tool belt. And I think that people are especially now, because we've talked about this idea that, positional power is kind of out the door. Relational power is very important these days. And
Yeah.
we'll talk about that in a later episode, I'm sure. But people want to feel invested in. They want to
Mm.
feel pursued by their leader. And so the Enneagram and other tools are great in helping us find ways of doing this, because if you're willing to invite more people to, kind of the table of your business and be able to utilize these people, because when you invest in them and they get better, then the entire team and the entire organization gets better. If you're simply just using people, they're eventually going to burn out. They're eventually going to grow sick of doing that one job. And so, man, I think just a great lesson for leaders and for us to be healthy is we've got to start utilizing our people and giving them tasks and lanes that are life-giving and not life-sucking. And so, yeah, cool thought there.
That's awesome. All right, man. I think that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for joining us on another Enneagram podcast. Thanks for people tuning in on Instagram. We're going to wrap up shop here, and we can stay on for a couple of minutes on Instagram to answer any questions or anything that might come up. But as far as the podcast goes, we're done there. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.
See ya.
Hey, thanks for joining us today on another Enneagram podcast.
As fellow leaders, we know it can be frustrating when it seems like you always run into the same problems on your team with the same people. But leaders just like you are learning how to lead their teams better using the Enneagram, and you can too.
So if you like what you heard today, we would love it if you would share this podcast on social media and leave a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts, preferably only good, reviews and ratings. That would be great.
If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram. We're at Another Enneagram, or head over to our website, anotherenneagram.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Another Enneagram podcast.